Hello, welcome to another gripping video from Enigmas of the Ancient World, formerly half of Pukache Productions. And today's long overdue video is actually on two sites that I believe should be studied or examined together. And those two sites are Abu Roash and Zawyet El Aryan. Neither of these sites get a lot of airtime in Egyptology. Zawyet El Aryan has been talked about a little bit recently because it's been pointed out that it's on a military base and maybe being used as a rubbish pit. And it also has, if you do some research, some really mysterious and intriguing things about it, as does Abu Roash, which still remains a closed site and is very difficult to get into. I went last year. And so here we go. Let's start very briefly with a recap of the 4th Dynasty timeline, which, as Egyptologists tell us, is Sneferu, Khufu, Djedefre, Khafre, then someone in between Khafre and Menkaure, who may be Baka or Bekeres or somebody, and then Shepseskaf and maybe Jedef Ptah at the very end. Anyway, so let's start at the center of all things wholesome, the United States, and then zip over to the Great Pyramid at Giza. And then you can orientate yourself and see where Abu Roash or the Pyramid of Djedefre, if you want to search in Google Earth, is. And we'll find that it's northwest of the pyramids of Giza. It would have been the northernmost of the great pyramids, and if we believe the Orthodox timeline, this would have been the second pyramid, Djedefre coming after Khufu. So Djedefre would have chosen not to build his pyramid on the Giza plateau, but to come up here and build his pyramid on a plateau that is quite high above the Giza plateau. And you can see right away from looking at it that it's got some very different characteristics to the other theoretically 4th Dynasty pyramids. And this has to do mainly with the central shaft, which is oblong in this case, and is sort of more of a, thought of by Egyptologists more of a 3rd Dynasty thing, because the step pyramid of Djoser has a central shaft. And again, that's a very interesting central shaft at Djoser's pyramid too, because it's about the same depth as this, almost 30 meters, and it had an interlocking 52-piece granite box in it that was opened in antiquity. So we never got to see what was in that box. But Djoser's pyramid was a shaft first, with a box in it and a cap on top that became a mastaba, and then another mastaba, and then more on top of that, and then it became a step pyramid. This is a different thing. This was clearly a pyramid. In the prior to the 4th Dynasty, the mortuary temple was on the north side. In this case, there's nothing really to the north initially, and then from the 4th on, it was on the east side, at the foot of the east side. Here you can see there's stuff on the northeast. There's what look like two little temple complexes on the northeast with the boat pit right there underneath it, and there is a little something on the southeast corner, but this is not standard by any means. Here's the causeway, which is in this case actually heading northeast instead of east-west. And where the Valley Temple would be to the east, there's just a cliff and lots of ground. Now, that Valley Temple, the mortuary temple to the north, could it be one of these still unexcavated buried structures? Just a quick look on Google Earth, it shows an absolute myriad, as it does almost anywhere in Egypt, an absolute myriad of still unexcavated, uncovered stuff. And we have to remember, it's very important to remember when studying Egypt, that only 15% has been uncovered or excavated. I'm including the Giza Plateau in that. Only 15% has been unearthed and excavated. And so always bear in mind with Egyptologists when they tell you that they know, that they're basing everything they know on a poor selection from 15% of the total knowledge that should be available. This, by the way, is the remains of the mud pyramid, Lepsius I mud brick pyramid, that would have been apparently about as large as Hawara, so quite large as well. But anyway, so Djedefre's pyramid, supposedly Djedefre's pyramid. How do we know? How do we know that it's Djedefre's pyramid? And the answer to that is as shady and as poor as the reasons for the Great Pyramid and the Second Pyramid being given to Khufu and Khafra. And in this case, it has to do with the boat pit that we see here, the so-called boat pit that we see here, and what was found in that. And so we'll get to that in a second. Here, this is Abu Roash. You can see how high it is, this plateau. I'm standing here at what would be the base of Djedefre's pyramid, and you can see your head is on a level with the peak. Feels like it's on a level with the peak of the Great and Second Pyramid in the distance. So this pyramid, which we're looking at now, the remnants of from the southeast corner, would have seemed large and beautiful and imposing from Giza. So this pyramid is built of limestone, and it had red granite facing stones and also the brilliant white Tura stones that are local. The granite, of course, comes from Aswan, which is roughly 1,000 kilometers away. This is the state of the pyramid today. It has been intensely quarried throughout history. We're talking about dynastic times, Roman times. This was actually a Roman military camp for a while, and you can see evidence of Roman quarrying techniques everywhere. But the Romans took basically what hadn't already been taken, and then, or the large part of what hadn't already been taken, and then the locals continued after the Romans left. You can see here some of that Roman technique I was talking about, where they would cut little gaps in the stone and put wood in it, and then wet the wood, and the wood would expand and crack the stone. But even in relatively modern times, when Petrie was there in 1888, there were upwards of 300 camel trains leaving loaded with stone every day. These sites were quarries. In fact, if you're at the Giza Plateau, the only hieroglyphs you're probably going to see at the whole site are on the quarry, on the wall facing the Second Pyramid, and it's the name of the quarrymaster and his title. And when I saw this, and I pointed out to Yusuf, and he told me that, I said, "What quarry? Are we talking about Aswan?" He said, no, this is the quarry. This is the quarry. So people were coming to the pyramids, even the Great Pyramid and the Second Pyramid, and taking stone away, being sold the stone and allotted the stone, throughout antiquity. And so how large some of these structures really were is, in some ways, is still open to debate. Here you can see some of that white Tura limestone, and this is the shaft that goes down into that central chamber. And try to retain some of these images in your mind for when we go to Zawyet El Aryan, because you're going to see some startling similarities, because they're almost identical. And remember also that when Petrie was here, he felt that he discovered the remnants or partial remnants of a pink granite box. So remember that, because that's going to be important when we get to Zawyet El Aryan. This is just an idea. You can see just how deep that 28-30 meters feels when you're in there. And I think it was sort of assumed this would have been the pharaonic burial chamber, this shaft. But I think when we look at Zawyet El Aryan, we'll find that they were doing something else entirely with this shaft. And we'll have a look at that. As I said, this site is closed. I'm not sure if we were really allowed to go in. We were allowed in. We weren't allowed to take any video equipment or camera equipment. I was allowed to take a couple of quick snaps on my phone, so that's what we've ended up with. But as you can see, it's a very particular structure, and especially in terms of the wall linings, the things that were going on here in terms of, I really feel like there was a mechanism for for lowering and raising things that had to do with those blocks on the side. There were all kinds of nooks and crannies here, and underneath the central slope of the shaft here at the bottom, about where Marie is here, down there, there's a furtherance of the shaft into the primordial mound. Whether there's more passages down there or other stuff, I don't know. Barsanti definitely felt that there was, at Zawyet El Aryan, he felt that there was more to be discovered there. And Zawyet El Aryan, as you'll see, is almost completely identical, but slightly larger to this one. This pyramid would have been larger than the third pyramid. It has a base of 106 by 67 meters, as opposed to Menkaura's, which is 103.4 by 65 meters. And this granite stone is a very interesting piece that was at the site. You see that how the left side of the stone there, where my hand is different from the right, and that's because a saw has cut across this stone from right to left, even though it looks like it might have been up-down. It's been cut from right to left. It's really hard to tell with my phone the striations that are here, but it's almost identical to the tube drill striations that you see at a lot of sites. And here, what you can see, what's really interesting about this stone is it's curved. It has a curve to it, and yet going from right to left across this stone is what the saw did, and it's just made very even, smooth cut all the way across. Doesn't seem to matter that the stone was curved at all. So that's a very interesting piece. Again, granite, 6.5 on the Mohs scale, so you're not cutting that with copper or anything. So now we've come to the boat pit, and I told you earlier this has to do with how the pyramid is dated, who it's assigned to, and once again, there was no boat in this pit. Boat pits at Giza, some of them had boats in them, but the boats didn't fit. The boats had been sort of dismantled and fit in there. I assure you, the ancient Egyptians were quite capable of building a hole to fit a boat. It almost feels like the holes were pre-existing, and they just sort of dismantled the boats and put them into the holes. I know Chris Dunn, author of Giza Power Plant, feels these were saw pits. And in this particular pit, whether it be a boat pit or a saw pit, there was no boat or saw to be found. Instead, there were roughly 120 statues, mostly supposedly of Djedefre, and some that were tentatively identified as his children, Baka, Setka, or Sethka, Hernit, and Neferhetep's. Neferhetep's, by the way, is the first known priestess of Hathor, and her name means her grace is beautiful, although a literal translation is beautiful offerings. I just think that's a really, really cool name. Anyway, so these statues were found in this pit, and one statue of Menkaura, and so Egyptologists said, great, that's enough for us. This is Djedefre's pyramid, and there's a statue of Menkaura in there because he must have done a repair to the pyramid at some time. End of story, mystery solved. So that is your Egyptological fact for the day. That apparently is Djedefre's pyramid because there was a pit with some statues that might have been him in it, and the statue that might have been Menkaura meant that Menkaura had done a repair to a pyramid that was only a few years old at that time. But again, Egyptologists use that a lot because a lot of the old structures show early dynastic repair work, and so they act like new structures needed repair, which doesn't really make sense. Again, a lot of this stuff that we see and that we're going to see only really makes sense when it's an inherited item or object that is then being repurposed and fit into a later ethos or belief system. And I think in a lot of ways that's what happened. If there is a cataclysm, this ground all around this pyramid, by the way, I just want to say before we leave here, is littered in seashells. They're everywhere. This was underneath water at some time, or there was water around that plateau at some point. And also, that entire pyramid is surrounded by early dynasty burials, including pharaonic burials. You've got Hor Aha, or Aha and Den, who are both First Dynasty pharaohs who were buried around that pyramid. There are lots of burials around that pyramid, almost as if that pyramid was already there. Why would you do burials around an area that has not yet had anything built in it? It would make a lot more sense if that pyramid was already there to then have these pharaohs buried around it. So from there, we nip down to Zawyet El Aryan. It's not that far away. And as you can see here from this Google Earth picture, which is all we're really going to get apart from the Land of the Pharaoh picture and Barsanti's photographs that he fortunately took, you're not going to get any modern photos of the site. It's on a military base. This is a military base around it. And we are directly above the central shaft of this pyramid. So immediately people are like, oh my God, it's a military base. There's a pyramid there. They've covered it with buildings and all the rest of it. Are they removing stuff? Are they keeping stuff there? And to some people, that's tinfoil hat. And to other people, that's reasonable. And then other people are like, hey, it's a worthless hole in the ground. There was nothing in there. That's the oblong pit, and there's the ramp. It's so useless. They just use it as military base and threw some rubbish in it. And to some people, that is fact and likely to be true. And maybe it's a little bit of both. What I can tell you is from my research, what I discovered that Barsanti found there is absolutely fascinating. And I would want to excavate that entire area. Of course, I would like to excavate everything there. And unfortunately, the corruption and the lack of excavation and the lack of care taken at these sites is going to continue while there's no money for the infrastructure and while there's no money to pay the people who actually work there. So at this site, Zawyet El Aryan, there's actually a second pyramid that is also supposedly unfinished. This one is theoretically a step pyramid, sometimes called the layer pyramid. And most of the above ground stuff is gone. There are still underground chambers, passages, etc. there. And it was while excavating and investigating this site that Barsanti came out with his foreman and saw the debris and rubble field for this pyramid at Zawyet El Aryan and made his way over there and was so blown away by the pit and what was going on that he immediately said, right, forget that pyramid. This is the one that we need to get into. So it took him a little while. He set up an expedition. He came back and he made a plan of the dimensions of the footprint of the pyramid, which we see here. And you can see that ramp, which goes to the north, goes down to that oblong chamber, which looks exactly the same as Abu Roash, except it's a little bit bigger. That southeast corner has a little structure that is similar to what you see at Abu Roash. And then there's the central pit. And in this case, unlike Abu Roash, which is now fully excavated and there didn't seem to be any granite in the bottom of that at all, what he found was this pit that was filled with sand. And here's one of his pictures. And if I had shown you this picture 15 minutes ago and told you that was Abu Roash, you would have believed me. And I wouldn't have blamed you because it's the same. It looks entirely the same. And these two structures, I believe, were entirely the same. And I believe they were both complete. And I believe they were both quarried. And I think they were both left over from an earlier time. These are my thoughts and theories about this because it's how, to me, it makes sense. So what he found under the sand, after he cleared the sand out, was all these blocks that had just been pushed in like rubble, granite and limestone blocks, and all just pushed into the hole. So he spent a lot of time excavating that, and once he got rid of that, he discovered all of these interlocking floor pieces of granite and limestone. In this diagram, C stands for calcaire, which is the French for limestone, G stands for granite. And there were about 20 meters of interlocking granite and limestone blocks in a very specific, very complicated, and almost impossible to move formation. And you can see here how they were interlocked and put together. And even more than that, sometimes coming down the sides, there would be stones that had been set into the shaft that then came out and further interlocked in with the stones. and it was almost impossible for Barsanti to remove this stuff, but he was sure there was something underneath it that he needed to get into, that he wanted to see, and so that's what he did. He excavated all of this stuff, and he moved all those stones out, Tetra style, and got them out up this ramp. And this is what he found at the bottom. Now you see how some of these stones are darker color? Those represent the granite stones, and those granite stones form a path that leads to the last granite stone that has a big oval vat in it. And this oval vat has a lid on the top of it, and when Barsanti excavated it and he took all this stuff out and found this, that lid was still sealed with lime and clay and had not yet been opened at any time. And since it was built. And we know this because he had to remove 20 meters of interlocking granite and limestone. So, now to the actual footage. The only surviving semi-modern footage, 35 millimeter film taken in 1955 for this movie Land of the Pharaohs. And you can see, it's like you're looking at Abu Roash. And while this is probably a styrofoam pseudo-sarcophagus, look at the lack of tension on those lines. It's hilarious. But what's actually realistic, even though that's much larger than the vat that's in here, because the vat is not a sarcophagus, this is actually a realistic size for a sarcophagus. And this is exactly why that box in the king's chamber is not any kind of sarcophagus. I barely fit into that, just being 6 foot tall with just regular clothes on. If you look at what the pharaohs were really buried in, wrapped in, and then, their funerary clothes and the ornaments, and then the box, the wooden box, and the painting, and then the box after that, and then put into the sarcophagus, you need a lot of room. Nothing's going to fit in that little box inside the Great Pyramid. You need something approximately that size. So that's something this movie at least did right. Anyway, so they're pulling this thing down into what they imagine is a burial chamber, but I don't believe it is a burial chamber. We found this oval vat, and this is Barsanti's own diagram. The pink is the granite, the yellow, all the limestone blocks, and you've got all their dimensions written on there. So as you look at this, you can tell there's a pattern, there's a reason for this. There's a reason why coming down that ramp, down into the bottom, these granite boxes are connected together and touch that last granite box, and then the rest of it's all surrounded by limestone. There's seriously a reason for that. You're bringing that you're bringing that granite 1,000 kilometers, over 500 miles. The limestone's local. Why? So here's another picture of Barsanti's removing these granite blocks and taking them up to the top. And look at the repair work on the sides of the walls here. It's evident if you go back some of those other pictures, you can see it too, or at the movie, you can see it. Now, Barsanti notes this. He knows he didn't do it. He's like, who did this repair work? So the first excavation of a site that's been buried since at least the 3rd or 4th dynasty, and probably longer, because it's probably way older than that, shows repair work. So who's doing this repair work? And again, this is similar with a lot of the other early dynasty stuff, where these things that were just built show repair work. So why are they repairing something they just built? Well, the only logical, real reason for that, look at they're master stoneworkers. They're not repairing something they just built. They're repairing something that's inestimably old. They're repairing something from Zep Tepi. They're repairing something from the first time, when the gods walked, when the gods built structures. And so to them they were gods, but as we look at this, these are probably humans who lived before the cataclysm, who were truly master stoneworkers, and who understood electrical energy and piezoelectric energy and all of these, sound energy, things that today we're only basically starting to understand. But look at this. This could be Abu Roash. It's a little bit bigger, but it's exactly the same thing. And remember, Petrie found what he thought to be the remnants of a pink granite box at Abu Roash. So did Abu Roash have this same layout that we see here? Did it have that same granite box? All that granite flooring in Abu Roash has been removed. But was there something right here at Zawyet El Aryan, or at Abu Roash, just like here at Zawyet El Aryan? Absolutely there was. Look at the underneath the ramp and the connection to whatever. It was the same thing as Abu Roash. These are exactly the same people who built these two sites. Here's the first picture we see of the oval vat with the lid off, and you can see how large the stone that it is cut into is in this picture. But if you think that's amazing, and again you see the repair work behind you in the wall, but if you think that's amazing, this is one of the most amazing pictures I've ever seen. Look at the size of that granite block that oval vat is cut into. That is massive. That has come from Aswan, so it's come 1,000 kilometers. It's been brought down that ramp into this 30-meter deep shaft, and it's had this oval vat cut into it with the lip left on. So that's part of the stone. It's all been removed, and it's been cut into this perfect interlocking shape that's connected to all these other granite pieces, and it has that lid that you see in the background. That perfect lid that has been put over that and sealed with lime and clay and stayed sealed under a further 25 meters of granite and limestone. And look at the gentleman on the right, by the way, there's no way he fits in that. This is not a sarcophagus. This is only about 4.5 feet long. It's not a sarcophagus. So, and it was sealed. So what was in it? Barsanti was excited. He thought he was going to find something that had a real clue to our history. And he opened it up, and there was nothing inside it, except a 10-centimeter high black ring of residue all the way around the bowl. So there was something in that bowl that evaporated over time and left a mark in the stone. And that vat was still sealed when it was excavated, sealed with lime and clay. So there's no water, there's nothing getting in there. So who does that, and why did they do that? It's extremely important. It's extremely important. And it was done for an important reason. And the same thing was done at Abu Roash. And both of those pyramids were dismantled. And I want to say something else. I've sort of touched on this before in other videos, but I want to talk very briefly about the Fourth Dynasty. And if we take Snefru out of it, and we look at the rest of the Fourth Dynasty, and we can take Jephthah off the end as well, and we'll leave Shepseskaf because supposedly he finished Menkaura's pyramid, right? All of those pyramids, including Abu Roash, everything on the Giza Plateau, according to Egyptologists, according to Dr. Zahi Hawass, a god amongst men of Egyptology, who had no idea what Göbekli Tepe was. According to them, everything on that plateau, including Abu Roash, was built in 85 years. Everything. 85 years. And we've talked about this before. The Great Pyramid itself has around 3 million blocks. Some people say anywhere from 2.3 to 3 million. If you look at 3 million blocks, and you want to build that in 20 years, which is what they tell you, they'll fill your head with stories of beer and bread and blankets, and 20 years building this pyramid. And if that's the case, with those 3 million blocks of stone, they were putting a block in place every 3.5 minutes. And if you want to say 40 years, then it's every 7 minutes. And if you want to say 80 years, it's every 14 minutes. If you want to say 160 years, it's every 28 minutes. We couldn't do that today. And as soon as you admit that that's your time frame and that's how long it's going to take, they're not tombs. Because the life of a pharaoh, you can't build a tomb for some guy, your great-grandfather. Where's your tomb? Where's your father's? Where's your grandfather's tomb? Why are you still bankrupting your nation for your great-great-great-great-grandfather's tomb, which is only halfway done? And that's a problem for Egyptology, because all of a sudden it's castles made of sand. So we need to start over. We need to look again, with a fresh view. And you can do it with the Kemet School, and you can even come in November and see a lot of these sites with Yusuf and myself. And we're going to Abu Roash, amongst a lot of other places with special permissions. So come in November if you like, and see it with us. And whatever you do, keep an open mind and travel the world. Thanks for watching this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and share if you feel it's worth it. Have a great day.